Let's talk about some of the other settings that you're going to want to have. Mainly, what kind of recording setup do you want to have? You have a couple different choices with this. MOV files or QuickTime files, those are great for what we're doing for schoolwork, and they're a nice size, 1920 by 1080. The MP4s are also good. Again, they look fine. AV-CHD is suitable to play back on a high definition TV. In order to start to set up your camera, you want to decide, how big do I want to go with my files? That's essentially what you're deciding. So 4K is very, very big files. Size of the files is 3,840 by 2,160. That's 4K. It's big. It'll blow up nicely, but you don't always need it to. FHD is fine. It's the resolution is good, and it's just, it's up to you. If you end up shooting in 4K, you may have to do some tricks in editing in order for your computer to be able to handle it. But in any case, once you know what kind of setting you want, this is how we're going to get it. So let's look at our menu here. All right, record setup, record mode. You decide one of those four formats, and then you hit the record format. So here's your 4K settings, your HD settings. You've got 60. The first number is the size of the file. The second number is the frame rate, and the third number is the bit rate. So if you need to capture like a lot of data really fast, you want to go for one of those 100 megabits per second. All right. These arrows, the down arrows, just keep taking you to different options. So I think I will just go for a HD 30 frames per second, 50 megabits per second. I like that size, and I like the 30 frames per second frame rate. Just so you know, so here's the MP4. It's the same kind of choosing mechanism. You've got all the, frames, frame size, frame rate and bit rate. And those down arrows show you all your options. Oops. And I always hit that time lapse accidentally. Record setup, MP4, record format, only a couple options on that one. 4K 30p, 100M. Last one to look at here is the HD. I'm not exactly sure what all these mean. If it was my camera, I would know. All right, so that's where you're choosing those, the record settings in the menu. We're going to go right into our next setting, which is gain, and that will be the iris. So one of the differences between a video camera, pro video camera like this, and a DSLR is that the video camera really does not have an ISO setting like the Canon or the Sony DSLR will have, but it does have a gain and an iris, and that's where these LCD screens are kind of handy, but you can just really see if you're too dark, too bright. You can be prepared to change your settings like every time you move the camera, like even a little bit. You can turn it from left to right and the light will change. So you just kind of want to know that these are really not hard to change. You just have to know where they are and use them. Okay, so what I'm looking for right now is my gain button. And so I'm going to put, and that's again on the bottom of my camera. The iris ring is this very first one here, right there. There's 3 rings on here. One's a zoom, one's a focus, and then the very closest one to you is the iris. And so right now, the iris is completely open. Oh, and now I'm twisting it awkwardly. There we go. And on my footage, sorry, I just can't reach it. I need to move. Okay, on my footage, I can see through the camera. Whoops, I'm hitting the wrong. That happens. And now it's completely closed. Okay, and then here I go, opening it up. That's maybe too bright, right about there. I'm gonna refocus. There. So the iris ring is the first ring that you feel, that rough edge. The second ring is the zoom. There's also, I prefer the servo, the little lever on the right side of the camera that pulls in and out. To me, maybe this is a little smoother to do it on the lens, but it's also harder to keep it, you know, from being jerky. And then this very first ring is the focus. There we go. Okay, so two things happening here. When I have the gain selected, and again, I get that from this little scroll button down at the bottom. When the text is white and then I've got the 24 dB in yellow, to get that 24 dB to change, I'm gonna scroll up or down. It's just like the white balance, right? So you select it, it lights up the word in white, the text goes white, and then you make the setting change by rolling the wheel. So you can see this number going down, which means the scene's getting darker, and this is to 0. But I can change my f-stop, my f-stop, and open that up a little bit. Open. So the f-stop is going to determine like what, if everything's in focus in the scene or if just the stuff in the foreground or the background is in focus. And then the gain kind of helps amp up more light or less light. And I'm trying to get that gain to open up again. All right, so I'm rolling up. This is kind of like a dimmer, right? So you're turning it up and keeping that F3 fairly open. That looks about right, like that. What if I zoomed in a little bit? I kind of want to. So I framed up my plant differently. I'm kind of cutting off the top a little bit. I'm just trying to make the composition just a little bit more interesting. I feel like I need to, I don't have this camera on a tripod, so I'm just trying to tilt it by putting stuff under it. So this is the process, right? You mess around with stuff and keep changing it around until you see something like that is pleasing to your eye. So a lot of people are afraid to really use the camera like experimentally and kind of have fun with it. Think about being a kid again and just, you know, you're the master of your own little world here. And you can make it look how you want. All right, so the f-stop opens and closes. The bigger the f-stop, the more light comes in, but the shorter the focal length. So that means you're gonna that you'll focus either on one thing in the background or one thing in the foreground, and you won't be able to do it both at the same time. If that f-stop is smaller, f11, f16, then your focal length will be a lot longer, so everything in the frame can be in focus. You need a lot of light for that. In this case, you need to add more light by moving the gain settings. So we've talked about white balance, we've talked about recording settings, we've talked about gain, but we haven't talked about shutter speed yet. So let's talk about that next.